All right, welcome to the FASA Leadership Lounge. I am Chad Frazier, the FASA president and an area superintendent with Marion County Public Schools. I have the pleasure of guest hosting the podcast this week and sharing knowledge from colleagues around the state. Today, I am honored to be joined by two extraordinary principals whose leadership is making a lasting impact in Florida and beyond. So joining us today is Dr. Michael George. He is currently the principal of Atlantic Coast High School in Duval County, where he has launched innovative programs such as the Mayo Medical Pathway with the Mayo Clinic and a Universal Advanced Placement Program for ninth graders. His inclusion-focused leadership has expanded advanced opportunities for historically marginalized students. He is the 2024 Florida DOE Principal of the Year and the 2025 NASSP Principal of the Year. Next, we've got Brent Frazier. He is the principal of Umatilla High School in Lake County, where he has raised the graduation rate to 97% and the acceleration rate to 99%. A two-time Florida Principal of the Year, 2023 for the Florida DOE and 2024 for NASSP. Brent is also a Leadership Florida graduate, a Chancellor's Leadership Academy Fellow, and an active community leader. All right, let's get right into our questions today so they can share some of their experiences in leadership with our audience. So can each of you briefly share what drives your leadership and education today? We can start with you, Dr. George.
All right, great. Well, look, I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak here, guys. So what drives my leadership and education today? I think for me, it's about pushing boundaries, witnessing progress, celebrating achievements, and seeing the positive impact that schools can have on the community at large and the students and the staff that work there. I'm a stubborn advocate for my student staff in our community. Like I love cultivating, an environment that inspires authentic collaboration, encourages students and teachers to exceed expectations. I love leaning into discomfort, embracing challenges, and strive just for continuous personal growth and collective growth. I'm in it for a good fight, man. I enjoy this work. What drives me is pushing kids, pushing myself, and being a part of the fight.
All right, thank you. Mr. Frazier, go ahead.
I'll tell you what, man, I should have went first, Mike. I'm going to tell you that. So first of all, thank you for having me. And I just want to say that what drives me is, we've coined this phrase, impact to legacy. So great people in great spots, they're going to make an impact. And, I've done that throughout my career. This is year 25 for me. But if you're going to leave a legacy, when you start to reach the end of your career, you're like, well, how do I impart myself in other people? How do I duplicate myself for the next generation? So public education, this grand experiment of public education keeps going. And I know for a fact that I am doing exactly what I was put on this earth to do. And that's to empower and grow leaders and to create pathways and opportunities for kids that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm here. And that is definitely what drives me.
Excellent, guys. I want to just touch base on the fact that, our audiences are assistant principals, aspiring assistant principals, current principals, district leaders. And whenever they have an opportunity to hear two passionate leaders that have an opportunity to really share what drives their work, it helps formulate what their why is as well. And so I appreciate you sharing that. So Dr. George, what's one moment in your leadership journey that significantly has shaped your perspective?
Yeah. I thought about this a lot because I think, there's a lot of things that shape, every single day, our leadership journey, right? I think for me, it was when I left Philadelphia, I was in Philly Public School for about 10 years. I was a dean of students and I actually moved to New Orleans and I took on a school leadership role in New Orleans. And for those of you that are not aware, New Orleans was 100% charter. And so that the ed landscape in New Orleans gave me a great opportunity to kind of step out of the normal traditional public school environment. And now there's a lot longer conversation to talk about advantages and disadvantages of the charter movement and all of those things. But the context for it is, New Orleans is 100% charter. So there was no public schools in that environment. So I stepped into an environment with honestly little real oversight. And that reality carries, like I said, those disadvantages and advantages. But as a new leader, it was freeing. So without the constant guardrails, I had the space to kind of discover my own vision and test my own instincts. A lot of the structures that were in place, that are in place in a lot of larger districts, I had to create on my own. So in the moment, I didn't necessarily see the advantage of that, but now coming back into the public school world and having that experience of having to create all of the structures for myself and for my school and for my students, I feel like that just set me on a path to like do pretty cool things. It's kind of like, once the blinders are off, they can never go back on. And so, I was able to see in my first experience as a leader, like the full edges of what that leadership work is, the gaps, the opportunities, the risks, and the possibilities, right? And it was like discovering like a new layer. And, for me, that was something that to this day, as a new leader, it permanently changed my expectations of what was possible in leadership.
Wow, that's a great perspective. That really will shine a lot of light on leaders that have always been in public education and don't understand what that world looks like. So, Mr. Frazier, how do you cultivate a culture of trust and high expectations within your school and with principals in your district?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with who you hire. So, I mean, you've got to set expectations. We have collective commitments here. We have for our entire staff, non-instructional and instructional staff, but we also have instructional collective commitments. And so if you've hired the right people, you've got the right people around you, a team around you who believes the same things, because it starts with someone's heart. Because you can teach everything in the world about leadership strategies. You can teach teachers, and it's the same philosophy with teachers. You can teach them anything you want to teach them. But if they don't believe the same things that you do, if they don't have the same core beliefs, then you're kind of spinning your wheels. So if you're going to cultivate those high expectations that are there, you cannot compromise. You got to lay out that vision clearly. You got to say that every kid can be successful. Every teacher can be a leader. Every teacher can be a great leader. And so once you build that and you impart in other people, I mentioned earlier, impact the legacy. So, great people in great spots. Schools are full of great people everywhere, great leaders everywhere. But if you're not imparting yourself in the people who are around you and building everybody up constantly, because change happens. And so there's high expectations out there, starts with your staff and it ends with your staff. And so you're only as strong as the strongest person that you have on your staff.
All right, thank you. So, Dr. George, what strategies have you found most effective for supporting principals and teacher development?
Yeah, and I'd like to double tap what Principal Frazier said, man. Like that, the role of hiring the right people, like that is it, right? Like that, if you do nothing else right and you do that, then you're pretty set up for success. So that spoke to me, and I think my response to this question around how to support principals and teachers. When you think about supporting teachers, it is based around what Principal Frazier was talking about. It's culture. Culture is king. Like that is the most important thing. So for me, the two biggest pieces of culture when it comes to how do I support my teachers is number one, building an environment where people feel safe to take risks. And the other piece is that they are safe to collaborate and ask for help. We always talk about like, we don't suffer in silence. In the end, I can't help you if you don't say anything. We need to make sure that we have structures in place and that I am available in order to make sure that everybody feels like they are supported. The other piece of that is the collaboration piece. You need to build in intentional ways for teachers to collaborate. Our school is not built for collaboration. Our physical structure is not built. It is pretty spread out. It's pretty siloed. So we have to intentionally build ways that we call like this intentional collisions. We want to find, for me as a leader, I'm trying to find spaces and areas and times where we can collide as a staff. And that is, for example, the past 2 years, I moved out of my office and I didn't have an office. And I moved my standing desk or wherever I worked to areas where teachers that I wanted to collide with were around. And so I was able to have those informal conversations in order to kind of help build that culture. I think the other piece is like, you have to build an environment. You have to build a culture where people are feel safe to take risks. In the end, the work that we do, if teachers are not taking any risks and pushing the envelope and trying to grow, we are failing kids. So as a principal, your job is to create a space where they can take risks, where they can get feedback, and where they feel like the risks that they take are going to be supported and they're going to grow from it. On the other side, how do you support principals? And you mentioned it, Mr. Frazier, as well, as the idea is like, you need to help them find their why. Like the most important thing I've realized is you need to be able to find yourself in this work. If you are not passionate about the work you do, if you cannot feel your leader when they're talking, if you cannot feel what they're saying, nobody's following you. And so when you talk about supporting principals, I think, the most important piece initially is helping them find their why and understand their journey and what makes them who they are. I truly believe that my advantages as a leader is my journey. And so I think when you talk about how do you support principals, especially new principals, it's like what in their journey defines their why and helping them lean into that piece.
Absolutely. So one thing I wanted to highlight, you said culture is king. And
Yes.
I do a lot of coaching with principals, do a lot of coaching with APs as well. And I was talking with a high school AP, and he made the statement to another AP. I happened to overhear it. And he said, culture beats strategy any day, every day.
Yep. Yep.
And I said, you're absolutely right. And I said, but you're missing a piece of it. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, culture plus strategy means every kid's successful.
Unstoppable. Unstoppable
Yep.
force at that time, no doubt.
Yep.
So to piggyback on that a little bit, like how do you lead through resistance when implementing change initiative?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing I would say to that is like resistance is a good thing. I truly believe that if everyone agrees with what you're doing, you're not pushing the envelope enough, right?
Yeah.
So the idea for me, resistance is an opportunity. So just for context, when I answer this question, my approach to resistance is like I thrive with resistance. I love getting people to turn to that are not necessarily in agreement or don't fully understand some of the work that you're trying to do, and getting them to, when they come up to you and says, I get it, I understand, and like really turning that thought, right? And so I think the first thing is to lean in, is to anticipate resistance, appreciate it, and take it and see it as an opportunity. I think a lot of times in leadership, especially early on in leaders' careers, if people do not agree with some way that they're going, they sometimes take it personally. And I think that actually works to your disadvantage. I think, the more that you're able to like understand the why of where it's coming from and see these opportunities of resistance as an opportunity, the better off you are as a leader. I think the second piece is you create a space for people to be understood. You need to listen, right? In the end, you can't come in here, forcing your will upon everybody, right? I think you need to create a space and a space for you to understand and for others to understand you. And I think lastly, with the how do you lead through resistance, I think the other piece is we kind of mentioned it earlier, is like you need to have a clear why, like a clear understanding of why you believe in this and what this initiative means, backed by data. And I think for me, as long as you lean in, you listen, and you have your clear why, you're able to work through any type of resistance you may have.
Yeah, you got to build that trust, Mike. There's no question about it. I mean, if you're going to be successful, you build that trust with your people, and it has to be a safe spot.
Yep.
And if you've hired the right people and they're believing the same things, that typically trying to understand why they're making some of the decisions that they're making, helping them understand those decisions, man, that's how you move them forward.
Yep.
So I can tell you to do stuff all day long, and I'm going to get ritual compliance. I don't need compliance. I need you to buy in. I need you to believe that what we're trying to do together as a group is certainly going to move things forward. So
Yeah,
man, I
and I
love
think,
what you said.
yeah, and I mean, like, we say that's important to teachers in their classrooms, right? That's what we want teachers
Yes.
to do for their kids. But a lot of times that gets lost when we talk about what we should be doing for our teachers, right?
Right.
And what we should be
That's
doing for
right.
the community at large. And so I think, the connection to how we want teachers to show up for kids in class is relative to how we want leaders to show up for their teachers in a school.
100%.
All right. So I'd like both of you to kind of tag in on this one as well. What's one practice that has led to meaningful gains in student achievement in your school?
Well, I'll take that first if you don't mind. So, I did a study now that was called Now Discover Your Strengths. And so I don't know if you've done that before. It's a survey through Gallup. Gallup put it out. There's some books. And so it helped me understand myself. And so what I like to do is one of my key things is ideation. And so I come up with neat, unique things that help address problems. And so we had major issues in math. And so this started at middle school and I took it up here to the high school. So everybody's familiar with AVID. So you know what AVID is. And, that's across the state of Florida. It's nationwide. So I had the thought process, hey, what if we took everything with AVID and we took all the organizational techniques and all the things that AVID teaches and all the pushing into higher courses and things that AVID promotes. And, what if we changed the name and what if we made it more math specific? So we called it MAVID. So every single one of my lower quartile kids, who are in algebra and, who are in geometry, they have a math certified teacher. They have a second class. So for us, it's mostly our 9th and 10th graders. We do have some 11th graders that make up some of our lower quartile kiddos. but kids who are struggling. And so underneath the context that if a kid is inside of a math class, 45 to 50 minutes is not going to get it done for a kid who has some gaps. So I have to close those gaps, because when you reach the upper level math problems, parents can't help anymore. And yes, there's lots of technology out there, but sometimes internet access is not what it needs to be. So I've got to have a person, a highly motivated, highly certified teacher who can teach the organizational techniques, who can talk about all the opportunities that are out there and really in real time close that math gap. And if we can close it, math is like climbing a ladder. If you're missing some rungs on that ladder, boy, you're done and you can't keep going on. And so we did that, and we saw some huge gains. And the first year here was almost a 30 or 40% jump in the lower quartile gains. So, I mean, I attribute it to that, and hiring the right person in that spot, and they plan and they work together. And then we opened up the second part of the day for that teacher. They're actually in supporting a lot of our lower level kids. So they're in the math class with them, with the math teacher. They plan together, and then they have a separate Mavid class to complete everything that they have. So that's probably the number one thing we've done.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think, you're speaking to kind of what I was going to talk about in terms of a practice. And it started with a survey too. It started with, really trying to understand the student experience. And I think a lot of times I thought I did a really good job of that in New Orleans. And I realized, as I moved over here, that I had a lot to improve upon. And so we did a survey when I first came in, just trying to get a better understanding of how our students felt in terms of, do they have access and opportunity when it comes to accelerated coursework? And we were able to kind of gain a lot of insight that a lot of our populations, specifically and especially our most marginalized populations, they did not feel welcome or that they had access to take our advanced coursework, AP, dual enrollment, all of those types of things. And that was coming in from freshman year. And that data, that voice allowed us to really start asking questions about, okay, well, number one, why? What structures are in place that kind of hinder that ability? And also, what can we do now to increase it? And over the past 3 years, we've started a program called Universal AP. And what that truly means is that we try to have as many ninth graders as possible, regardless of level, taking an AP class when they come in their freshman year. We believe that kids are tracked far too early on in elementary and middle, and It's really hard to get off that track, right? And there are also, you spoke on Avid, like there are skills that you learn in Avid that are foundational to success in high school and beyond. That doesn't mean you have to go to college, right? Like you don't just need AP because you are going to college. And so we believe that we wanted an Avid type of foundational course that really got kids to feel uncomfortable, to push their thinking, but to also gain confidence, right? So
yes,
there's a lot built into it, right? Who you hire and how you scaffold and how you tier and how, it's been a growth over the past 3 years trying to figure out, what works and what doesn't work. But I would say this, in 3 years, we've tripled the amount of students coming through that Universal AP program that have earned college credit, right? We have increased the number of students tested in our minority student population. So for example, we increased the number of Black students tested by 87% over the past 3 years, Hispanic 92%. We've also increased the number of students getting that college credit, our Hispanic students by 133%, and our Black students 125%. But that is all while at the same time increasing our overall AP pass rate from 66 to 71. So we're improving as a school overall, and we're doing it by increasing access and opening these courses for everybody to come through. And I think that spoke to the student experience that you were really talking about earlier, Principal Frazier.
Yeah, that's
Mike,
funny.
I tell you, I just add a little bit of that too. So I love the open access stuff. We're ACE, we have AP, we have dual enrollment as well. And so when you take a look at stuff, if you're talking about equity, and you're trying to look at data and you're trying to take emotions out of the thing, and you're really asking true questions. How do I move my kids forward? Yeah. And how do I provide those opportunities for those kids? Yes, you're right. You have to hire the right people, but also you have to go and recruit. So, we started our ACE program here, and, we went from, 48 kids tested to, and, we're a school of about 950 kids. We gave right at 1,400 tests with a 60% pass rate. So all of those college credits are earned. All of the right futures are earned because of the ACE diploma that we have. But, I looked at the picture of our kids who earned that ACE diploma, and I said, what the heck is going on? So you look at it, and I'm like, that doesn't match the demographics of my school. We have got to go out and recruit these kids because they're coming from areas that they don't have anybody who's an advocate for them. So we've got to be that advocate. And I love what
Yeah.
you said with that. And I hope and I wish more schools would, buy into that, because you are providing opportunities for kids that you are changing. That is a generational change. And when you provide that stuff for them and you put them in position, like we got to be their mamas and papas. And so
Yeah.
that means that you got to take that ownership, and you got to
Yeah.
do it in a different way. And just being exposed to the rigorous coursework puts kids in a better situation than they would be without it, for sure, always.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that I 100% agree about setting the bar. I use this phrase. I don't even know where I heard it, but the idea that the whole job of a principal is to raise the floor so your teachers can blow the roof off, right?
Oh,
And I
yes.
think when it comes to this, man, like once you set the tone, my freshman experience when all my parents come in, I let them know this is what we're doing. If you looked at your schedule and you saw an AP class, that is not a mistake, right? And Chad, we had that question earlier about resistance. This was one of the ones that not everyone, a lot of my staff members were not on board with this conversation early on. This is not something that there's a lot of gatekeepers in education, right? And I think this is something that has taken 3 years to get to a place of it's like, oh, I understand the why. But their
Yep.
voice is important in this, right? And their voice is important in terms of like getting them to understand what this actually does for kids and what this does for an entire school community. And as Brent, as you said, this is generational, right? If you
That's right.
can create this as an expectation, and the stories that you get from kids that we have a lot. Our school's 3,000 kids. We represent 80 countries and 40 languages. We are a extremely diverse school, more than any other place that I've been. And we have kids coming in saying, my goal was to graduate high school. That was it. And they made it through an AP class, and some of them got threes. And it's like, I actually have college credit now. Like my goal has nothing to do with high school anymore. It's about what is after that. And to have that confidence and to build that in their freshman year, like the sky's the limit with that.
No, I totally agree. And that's the thing that's why I wanted the two of you as high school principals, because for every principal has to understand the power of each moment. When you start, I read a book not too long ago called The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. And it basically says that our most memorable positive moments are dominated by 4 elements: elevation, insight, pride, and connection. And so when the principals truly understand that you have that ability to truly, at any given moment, at any given time, you can change the trajectory of a kid's life.
Yes.
And so the one of the next questions I've got, guys, for us, just actually both of you chime in however you'd like to. What advice would you give to emerging educational leaders navigating today's complex educational environment?
Yeah. I mean, I can jump in first if you'd like, Brent.
Go for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I thought of this in I think of this in kind of like 4 buckets for me, right? And I think the first one is you need to find your village, right? I think one of the best qualities of a good leader is they know what they don't know and they know where to go to find it. And I think the best leaders have a quality village of other leaders around them that they can bounce ideas off of. I think a lot of times leaders get in trouble because they're number one, either too afraid to ask or they don't know where to go. So I think one thing in terms of how do you navigate it is you don't do it alone, right? I think the second thing is to find in, and I said that I use this word a lot, is you need to lean into the discomfort. The difficult conversations, the more you avoid them, the worse they get. So you need to provide opportunities to have uncomfortable conversations. And I think there's a lot of ways you can do it. On our side, what I try to do is I do every 2 weeks is just an open town hall, optional for all staff. Sometimes there's a topic, whether it's based on something happening outside or something that's happened in the district or in our school, or it's just an opportunity just to have a conversation about what is, something that we have done. And I think for me, principals try to, a lot of times you try to control the environment, right? Because that's important to us. But creating an opportunity just for people to come in, you never know what's going to be said. That's important, right? And a lot of times that is centered in some of the political things that are happening around the state and around the country right now. I think the third thing I think about is the difference and understanding the difference between responding versus reacting. Reacting is often it's an immediate and emotionally driven response, right? It's instinctive. You want to fix, defend, or kind of control in the heat of the moment, right? Where responding, on the other hand, is more of a deliberate and thoughtful. It's not that you're not being slow or passive, but it does mean you're being able to take a breath and truly think about what you're going to say before. And I think as principals, we can get in trouble when we react and not respond. And I think especially early on in our experiences, we tend to go to the reacting side versus the responding side. The last piece, and this is something that I've realized later in my career, is that you need to take care of yourself, right? Like your own social, emotional, and physical well-being is more important than anything. And so how do you navigate the ed environment? It's never going away, right? And the conversations are never going to get easier. You need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You're making sure that you're investing in your own growth. And I think that is probably one of the most important things about this leadership role.
Well, I would go ditto, 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 ditto. Mike, you're not allowed to go first anymore. I'm gonna have to go. But I would say this. I would say definitely you gotta learn as a leader how to keep the little things little. So you talked about reacting and thinking before you react. Man, I've made enough mistakes in my time. Whoo! Some of them, none of them sunk my ship, thank God. But I've said some stupid things to parents and other people that I probably should not have done before. I've jumped into some decisions and I made some quick decisions. See, I'm a buyer. I'm not a shopper. So if you show me a good idea, I'm going to buy instantly. And sometimes I don't process enough or do enough research on it or get enough opinions on it. And so I've learned how to do that, and I've learned how to involve more people in my leadership team. I mean, I depend on them big time. I fully believe that the smartest person in the room is the room, no question about it. And that's not easy to do when you're a talented person. See, most principals, high school principals, we're alpha personalities. Boy, we think we can do anything until we can't, which you find out on day one that you can't. I remember telling someone when I first became a principal, I've never had a job where I felt like the biggest superhero in the world and the biggest idiot within a 5-minute span. And so it's, just so interesting how that goes. But, keeping the little things little, I will tell you, taking care of yourself, that's important. Health wise, you have to do that. And you have to take those moments because it never stops. You're getting calls constantly, emails constantly. You're constantly thinking about things because you want to keep your edge. And, you're trying to figure out the school grade game, but ultimately you're trying to put kids in the best position that you can so that they can be successful in life. I don't care if you graduate high school. I mean, I do care, but I don't care. I care what you're like when you walk across that stage. What do my graduates look like? Are you ready to take on that world? And so that thought process inside of anybody that's good is constantly dominating you. And so, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I can certainly speak for myself. And the last piece I would say is what you said. So I think that every single principal has to have a professional development plan. You've got to push the envelope. So I need to know what's out there. I need to know what's going on in the world. I need to know what's going on in this state. That's why it's so involved. It's so important to be involved with an organization like FAFSA. It's so important to go to conferences and take the time to do that because that one little thing that can inspire you can change the life of a kid and change the path of your school. And so if your cup is if your cup is empty because you're pouring and you're pouring and you're pouring and you're pouring, buddy, I'm going to quit. So you've got to stop and you got to let somebody else fill your cup back up so that you have enough to give everybody else, because everything at your school starts and ends with you. And so you cannot run out of gas, and it feels so many days like you're going to run out of gas. And so you got to be leery of that for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, that all speaks to me. I think also, we realize that depending on your district, I mean, you may be left alone as a leader. The better you are, the more people leave you alone, right?
That's right.
And I think as I've gotten more experience and I've just gotten older, it's like I thrive off of learning and getting better. And a lot of times, and this is not a knock on any district or anywhere. It's like it's on you to figure out how to get better, right? And I think if you lose that energy and that excitement about getting better and that pursuit, then you're kind of dead in the water. And I think, far too often, that's why, leaders don't stay in the profession and quality leaders don't stay in the profession is because in the end, they're not growing. They're not getting it from many different areas. And unfortunately, it's put on you to figure it out. And I think I agree, getting involved in FAFSA has been one of the best things I've done in terms of just like building a community around me. Look, I met you, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like that has been, that has been a big deal for me. And so I agree. Like anybody listening, you've got to find your village. You got to find your community.
Absolutely, guys. So as we wrap it up, what's one book or resource every educational leader should read or watch?
So I would recommend a short read, could be a bathroom read for you. TMP's article, Greenhouse Schools, that's what we have basically. I mean, it's led to a complete transformation of what we're trying to do this year and empowering leaders and really getting feedback from people. It's a powerful piece. If you ever get a chance to read it, you should read it.
Yeah. I would say this, and I'm gonna not answer your question and answer your question at the same time. I've actually moved away from any ed books. I haven't learned anything in an ed book, and that's also on me. But I think where I've learned the most is like through like organizational psychology or just general leadership books. Really good principles are good leaders anywhere. They thrive everywhere. And I realize that some of those qualities that leaders have that are not specific to education. So I would say for me, books like Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, and Endure by Alexander Hutchinson are all books that speak to how you can push the limits of what you think and how you can grow folks, how you communicate, and how your mind speaks to your ability to do things, right? And how those constraints in your mind create constraints actually outside of your mind. And so it is transferable skills and transferable knowledge that I think in a lot of ways that as an education leader, we never touch. And I've really learned a lot from those books, and we've done book studies on them. And it has been something that's helped, kind of, diversify my thinking.
Okay. So last one, guys, both of you, what's a leadership mantra or a quote you live by?
I'll just keep the trend going for my theme of the day is comfort is a slow death. It's sitting on my wall when you walk out of my room.
Mine would be dream it, believe it, and achieve it. That's the theme that we have when I came here at the school. I don't change themes every single year. That's our motto. That's what we're about. And that's how we inspire our kids.
All right. Well, Dr. George, Mr. Frazier, thank you guys today. And to all of our listeners that are out there, please share the FAFSA Leadership Lounge with your colleagues so we can continue to reach more leaders across the state and the country. The FAFSA website is always available as a resource at fasa.net. Stay tuned, guys. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Chad Frazier and produced by Jeff Willoughby. Original musical recordings by David Higgins. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topics, suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.